And good evening, Pittsburgh Steelers fans. Welcome to another episode of Steelers Friday Night Six Pack. I'm your host, as always, Tony Defio, and I thank you for joining me on this fine and very cold Friday evening. That is, of course, if you're watching live right now on our YouTube channel, Beyond the Steel Curtains YouTube channel, and we're also live now on Facebook. So if you're joining us on Facebook, please thank you for watching, and please check out all of our other live podcasts, such as The Hangover with myself and Brian Anthony Davis every Monday. There's the Curtain Call with Michael Beck and Jeffrey Benedict. That's every Wednesday night. There's the Cap Room with one of the dudes from Australia. There's the Touchdown Under Show with Matty Peverall and Mark Davison. And one of those Australian dudes are the ones who do the Cap Room. One of these days, I'll figure out which one that is. And then there's the Scobro Show with co-editor Dave Schofield and his big brother Rich. There's the Steelers Preview, and I think that's it for the live shows. And you can catch those on any audio platform. And we also have audio only podcasts, such as the Live Mic with Michael Beck, the Stat Geek with Dave Schofield, Let's Ride with co-editor Jeff Hartman. The Retro Show with myself and Brian Anthony Davis, and we've been doing a lot of Super Bowls lately, and I think we're going to do another one on Monday I don't know when that airs, but that's when we're going to tape it, so please check those out. And of course, as always, check out Behind the Steel Curtain, the website, where we bring you news, commentary, breaking stories, film breakdown, draft stuff, you name it. As we like to say, it's your one-stop shop for all your Steelers needs. And before I get into the heart of the show, I just want to welcome everybody to the live chat. There's Lumberzack, always a favorite. Let's see, Jared Devil, George Teston, who's becoming a regular. Givaldo Ramos Givaldo. I don't know if I said that right, but it sounds like a really cool name. So welcome. Javier Mori, Steeler Chick 46, who's also becoming a regular. Thaddeus Kennedy, Steelers Pittsburgh. And yes, to quote Lumberzack 94, please don't forget to like the video. We're trying to get up to 8,000 likes on YouTube. I believe that's where we're headed. But we Brian Anthony Davis, the podcasting manager, he's done a great job, along with Jeff Hartman and Dave Schofield and Michael Beck and everybody else on our team. They've done a great job of really bringing our podcasting game to a whole new level since the summertime. It's really remarkable what they've been able to do. So please check it out. There's a lot of great content, a lot of great Steelers stuff, and you'll never go hungry if you're hungry for the Steelers. If you check out Behind the Steel Curtain. So please check us out. So bad Steelers here. Coffee for me. I don't know what that means. My man Terry T Money. It was his birthday last week, and I'm a birthday guru. I remember birthdays all the time, but for whatever reason, I forgot Terry's birthday. But it was a special day last weekend. He's a big-time Pittsburgh sports fan, loves the Steelers, loves the Pirates, loves the Penguins. He's a Pitt alum. He goes, well, back in the before time, he went to all the as many Pitt football and basketball games as he could. I'm sure he's excited about the Pitt Panthers basketball team and how it's had a bit of a resurgence under Jeff Capel. So say happy birthday to Terry if you get a chance. Great guy. So anyway, on having said all that, here's what I'm going to touch on, and I guess I'll touch on it right now. Thanks to Thaddeus Kennedy. I was going to save this for later in the show, but he brings up a really great article from a former Steeler, and Thaddeus says, anybody read the article by Kordell Stewart that came out yesterday? Yes, I read that today. I read some of it yesterday, but I was busy. Today I had a chance to read the full story, and it was fantastic. I think it originally appeared in the Players Tribune. A lot of athletes write articles, and I read it on Yahoo today, but I think it's from the Players Tribune. But anyway, Kordell talks about his time as a Steelers quarterback and how things quickly went from great to ugly for him here. I mean, he was the toast of the town back in 95, 96, 97. He led the Steelers to the AFC Championship game in 97. His first year as a starting quarterback, he took over from Mike Tomczak. If you remember, Kordell was a second-round pick in 95. Sorry, I froze there for a second. My screen froze. I was distracted. But anyway, Kordell, he was a second-round pick in 1995 out of Colorado. He was brought in as a quarterback, but he was such a great athlete when he was playing receiver in practice. They said, "Wow, this guy's a weapon. We have to use him." And he was part of the Steelers' run to the Super Bowl in 95. That Super Bowl 30 team. He not only played quarterback, but he played receiver. He lined up in the backfield. He punted. He did everything, and he earned his nickname Slash that year. I think it was Myron Cope that named him that. I think it was Myron. Quarterback / receiver / running back / punter, you name it. But by 97, he was the starting quarterback here, and he took him to. It was a roller coaster season as far as his personal performance was concerned. Brian, Anthony Davis, and I, we've done our share of retro shows about that 97 season. It was a fun season, but he had his ups and downs. But ultimately, he led them to the AFC Championship game. Unfortunately, he came up short. Steelers came up short in that game against the Broncos at Three River Stadium. And I don't know, from that point on, Kordell kind of fell out of favor with the fans. He went from being the toast of the town. That 98, that summer of 98, I remember being out and about, and I probably mentioned this before. And everywhere you looked, there were Slash number 10 jerseys. Everywhere you went that summer. But by 98, by the start of that regular season, the fans turned on him. I mean, they turned on him, and they turned on him quickly, and it was pretty ugly. And these rumors got started that had to do with his sexuality and being arrested at Shenley Park. And it turned out that none of this was true. And if this happened today, I think Kordell, whether it was true or not, he would have a lot more support about his sexuality, as far as people saying, well, why are you trying to use that against him as a weapon? Whereas back then it was a different time in the late 90s, and the people that started these rumors, they did so because they wanted to try to hurt him and ruin his career. And I can guess, any number of reasons why. It had to do with race. It had to do with the fact that the Steelers had come up short so many times in the 90s. They came close to winning the Super Bowl many times, but they just always came up short at the end. And I'm sure that has something to do with it. But it was if you remember the late 90s, and I've always lived in Pittsburgh, and I was here then, it was quite an ugly time. And people think the social media age is bad, but I think if social media existed back then, Kordell would have had a much easier time, because it would have been a lot easier to refute some of these rumors and stories regarding him. But back then, it was really a perfect storm for Kordell as far as everything that happened with him. At those 90s teams, I think they were at the tail end of being competitive, because they lost so many free agents. Year after year, they lost so many pivotal free agents that made them competitive. And by the time Kordell took over, I think they were on their last leg, and they had a pretty good defense. They had Yancey Thigpen. They have Jerome Bettis. They had an okay offensive line, but overall, the team wasn't nearly as strong as it was in Cowher's earlier years, 92, 93, 94, certainly the 95 team. It wasn't nearly – the core of that team wasn't nearly as strong. And I think between that and Chan Gailey leaving as Kordell's first coordinator and becoming the coach of the Cowboys, and I think it all just sort of came together in a bad way for him. And he was 25, 26 years old. He's the same age as me, so I could relate to at least a little bit to what it's like trying to start a career, trying to become your own person, and trying to make it on your own. And the one thing I couldn't relate to is having an entire city believing these rumors about you, and for whatever reason creating these rumors because they were unhappy with your play on the football field. And as it turned out, Kordell went to Dan Rooney, and he was a very powerful man, obviously. And according to Kordell, Mr. Rooney found out that this rumor was started by a police officer. Now, what was going through this guy's mind that started this rumor is beyond me, but I think it's a lesson in because it was never, this wasn't true. He was never arrested. None of that ever happened. But the rumor took on a life of its own, and it followed Kordell. And I was just getting into the internet back then, and people in other cities, and this was a decade before social media, and people in other cities, like I'd be talking to people in chat rooms back then, when you felt like a loser for being in the chat room. Now the whole world's a chat room. Everything's a chat room. This is the chat room. Facebook's a chat room. But back then, being in chat rooms was seen as like what a loser would do. So that's why I did it in my 20s, because I didn't have any money. But anyway, but people would say to me, "What's up with these rumors with Stewart, your quarterback? What's going on there?" So it wasn't just a citywide thing. People everywhere were aware of these rumors about Stewart. And, for him to try to for somebody to create these rumors, I think it's a lesson in taking a football game far too seriously. And I think that's if you're so invested in a football team or any team of any sport that you're going to try to ruin somebody's life, then you have some serious issues. I don't care if you're a police officer, a doctor, who you are. If you're Joe the mechanic from Blawnox, you have some serious issues, and you need to get your priorities straight. So whatever was going through this cop's brain, I hope he's in a better place today, because he certainly needed to be in a better place. He certainly needed to find a way to become a better human being, because that was awful. And, Kordell, in this article, he talked about how everybody had a story about how they heard it from a cop. And I had two different people who said that. Oh, yeah, my cousin is a cop, and he told me that this is true. He knows for a fact. Like, my boss at work told me this, and my brother told me this. So it's funny how groupthink works. Even back then, before social media, how you can get an entire community to sort of think the same way and believe the same things, and even if there's no evidence. So, but I think Kordell made some good points in this article. He had when you really look at it, if you examine his 5-6 years here as the starting quarterback off and on, he had a good run. I mean, he took him to 2 AFC title games. Yes, they lost both at home, and that sucks. But I think, I've been a fan for 41 years, and if I only glean happiness from Super Bowls, I've only been happy 3 times, because I've only seen him win 3 of them since I started watching. So the point is, he created some great memories here, and I think another lesson is we should embrace some of these athletes that had some good runs here. They just didn't win titles, and Kordell was one of them. And another one is Neil O'Donnell. I mean, I know it's taboo to say, but he's only one of 3 quarterbacks to ever take Pittsburgh to a Super Bowl. And, he might as well have been a ball boy when he was here. I mean, nobody wants him back. He has no association whatsoever with the organization. And I don't know if it's a two-sided thing. Maybe he doesn't want to come back and embrace the organization in any kind of way. But it's just sad that these guys, I mean, they bring us so many great memories. But if they come up short of a title, then we kind of try to forget about them, unless you're an all-time great like a Rob Woodson or something, and then or a Dormani Dawson, and then we obviously find them. So if you hadn't had a chance to check that article out, please do, because it's a fantastic article, and I think it brings to light a lot of what was going on with the team in the late 90s, and it was a really crazy time here. And I don't remember. I was a teenager in the 80s, and there were some ugly times here then. So I don't know what made the 80s different than the late 90s, because the 80s, I don't remember a lot of this stuff going on then, as far as these rumors and the angst within the community about the team. But the late 90s, there was a lot of angst with this team involving the community. Like, if you listen to the talk shows, the post-game shows, I mean, so many calls that they had to drop from who knows what they were saying, especially about Stewart. It was just a really ugly time here. And it was people think now, with social media, everything's blown out of proportion, but back then it was really bad. And I have a $5 super chat from just me, and she thinks, do you think he was if he meaning Kordell was a quarterback today as a running quarterback, he'd do good? Well, I think as he said in the article, he kind of helped change the game and change the perception of quarterbacks. Him along with guys like Randall Cunningham and Michael Vick. I think Cunningham and Vick were obviously better than Stewart, but if you see what's going on today with quarterbacks in the NFL, it's a lot of RPO, and a lot of people think Ben Roethlisberger can't be a good quarterback in today's NFL because of the way they're asking quarterbacks to play. I mean, everybody does. Just about every quarterback in the NFL now is like an RPO kind of quarterback. You look at Tom Brady's a bad example, but you look at Patrick Mahomes. He's the other quarterback in the Super Bowl, and he's an RPO, and he doesn't really run all that often, but when he has to, he can. So I think if Kordell played today, he had issues with accuracy and everything, and there's no question about that. But if he was playing today, he'd probably be accepted more, and people wouldn't be asking him to switch to receiver like they did back then. It's funny how people say, and Kordell mentioned this in his and by the way, thank you for the $5 super chat. It's just me. It was very generous of you. I always appreciate that. But Kordell mentioned in his article that he saw Mr. Rooney at Jerome Bettis' Hall of Fame induction, and Mr. Rooney said, if you would have been a receiver, we'd be inducting you right now. And I think a lot of people believe that, and it's nothing against Mr. Rooney, but I don't know. Kordell's sample size as far as a receiver was so small. I don't know how you can make a determination. In a lot of ways, you could say he caught the league by surprise, and maybe if they had time to prepare for him as an actual receiver, they might have shut down what he could do well. But that's what a lot of people do, and it's hard, and you can't disprove it. A lot of people just talk in absolutes, mostly the fans and the media. But even Mr. Rooney, I'm sure he was trying to compliment Kordell, but as he said in the article, I wanted to be a quarterback, and he wasn't the greatest quarterback ever. He certainly wasn't, but he had a nice little career for himself, and as he said in the article, he did it his way, him and Frank Sinatra. So if you ever, again, please check that out. And wow, I can't believe I rambled on that with that topic for so long. Obviously, it was a very important topic to me. It was a very important time in my life. Kordell and I are the same age. We're late 40s. He mentioned in the article he's 48. I'm 48. So I can really relate to again a lot of things that he was going through, at least as a person. Maybe not as a football player, but as a person, as far as trying to find your way in your mid-20s, and you're expected to be you're on your own, and you're expected to have all the answers, or at least you think you are. And in his case, he had a whole different set of problems that than an ordinary citizen like me would never even dream of having to deal with. So again, please check that article out. You can find it just about anywhere. I think it's all over the internet. So I found it on YouTube. You can find it. Just Google Kordell Stewart, and I'm sure you'll find it. So on that note, I think I'll end this part of the show and the first half of this edition of Steelers Friday Night Six Pack, and I will be back in a few seconds with part two. If you're on YouTube or Facebook, I'm obviously not going anywhere. Just stick around. I'll be right back. But if you're listening on the audio version, please download part two of this episode of Steelers Friday Night Six Pack. And welcome back, everybody. Welcome back to this episode of Steelers Friday Night Six Pack. I am your host, Tony Defio. And this, of course, is Super Bowl weekend. I almost said the Steelers. I wish. The Chiefs and the Buccaneers are about to face off in Super Bowl 55 in Tampa, Florida on Sunday at 6:18. I think that's when they always start the Super Bowl. And I think it's a really interesting matchup. I really do. I think it's I was trying to find a way to root against somebody in the Super Bowl, but I can't bring myself to do that this time. I just think it's I mean, you could find any number of people to root against, but they kind of cancel each other out. You have Le'Veon Bell with the Chiefs, you have Antonio Brown with the Bucs, you obviously have Tom Brady, who a lot of people don't like if you're NFL fan or a Steeler fan. Bruce Arians, the former offensive coordinator. But I don't really have any animosity against any of those people. It's kind of dissipated. When it comes to Tom Brady, the hatred I had for him kind of went away when he left the Patriots. It was more about the Patriots and them building a dynasty and them being impossible to beat, especially at Gillette Stadium. Once Brady left, that all went away. You see where the Patriots are right now. They didn't even make the playoffs, and they're searching for a new quarterback, and they're searching for a new way. And, who knows how long Belichick's going to even coach for them anymore. So, they're not really a threat anymore. As far as Tom Brady, I mean, if he wins another 5 Super Bowls, who cares? I mean, as long as it's not with the Buccaneers and he gets 7 with them and surpasses the Steelers, I really don't care. All he's doing at this point is building his own little Super Bowl dynasty. And, win or lose on Sunday, he's still going to be the GOAT in the eyes of many. He's still going to be considered the greatest of all time in his position. So, win or lose, I mean, he's playing with house money at this point. I mean, to leave the Patriots and go to the Buccaneers and take them to the Super Bowl in your first year, I mean, at the age of 43, is anybody going to think his legacy is tarnished if he loses this game? As far as the Chiefs, I mean, they're a great story too. Patrick Mahomes is the new face of the league, and he's trying to get to where Brady is at, and which I don't think any quarterback's ever going to take a team to 10 Super Bowls. I mean, never say never, but it seems highly unlikely. I mean, you have to go all the way back to Otto Graham to have to see a kind of the same kind of championship run that Brady's been on in his career. But if the Chiefs win, then they'll be the first team to repeat as champion since 2004 when the Patriots did it. So that's pretty interesting. They've gone from an organization that hadn't won a title since the late 60s to now, they're one win away from going back to back. But I think the interesting thing is, the Chiefs kind of remind me, not necessarily in the same way, but they remind me of the Seahawks of the mid 2010s, with Russell Wilson and a great defense and Marshawn Lynch, right? And they look like they were destined to win back-to-back Super Bowls, and who got in the way? It wasn't necessarily Tom Brady, but he was the quarterback, and the Patriots were the team that stopped them. And I think that wouldn't it be funny if that kind of happened again? But there's other pretty interesting stories. Believe it or not, Antonio Brown. I mean, here's a guy who, he's a hard guy to root for. There's no question. I mean, he's hurt a lot of people in his life. He left the Steelers in the worst way possible. He burned every bridge on the way out of town. A lot of people are questioning whether or not he has what it takes to win. And I said last week that him and Bell are basically extras in this game, and that's the truth. But wouldn't it be something if Brown especially makes a great play in this game and helps the Buccaneers win? I mean, you talk about finding redemption. And who knows, maybe it'll make him grow as a person, right? So there's a lot of interesting stories. Bruce Arians, he was kind of the whole city of Pittsburgh just turned on him when he was a coordinator here. Where we heard that before, right? And he kind of said, they kind of made it seem like he was going to retire. They said, no, I'm not going to retire. And next thing you know, he's a head coach. He goes from supposedly retiring as the offensive coordinator to being a head coach in the NFL. And now he's with his third team since leaving Pittsburgh. I think it's his third team. He was with the Colts, Cardinals, now the Bucks, and he has them in a Super Bowl. So if he wins the title, I think that would be a form of redemption for him too, 10 years later. So I think there's a lot of interesting storylines with this Super Bowl, and I kind of feel bad, and in a small way, I feel bad for the players because they don't get to have the true Super Bowl experience because of the pandemic. You have obviously the Buccaneers playing at home, the first team to ever play a Super Bowl in its home stadium, and there's only going to be 22,000 people there. So is it really any kind of a home field advantage? Probably not. Then you have the Chiefs, last week on this show, I stated that they'll be spending the second week in Florida, so travel won't be an issue for them. But as it turns out, they're not going to be there. I think they left today. Because of the pandemic, they wanted to, out of an abundance of caution, they wanted to stay away from Florida until the last minute. They didn't want to, they wanted to stay at home and limit travel. So they don't really get to experience the true Super Bowl experience where you go down and you mingle with the fans and you get to do the Radio Row thing and you have media day. So, it's not a true, I guess it's not a true full experience for either team, but it's like Jonathan Scott said when he was on that Super Bowl 45 team back in 2010. He was from Dallas and he came to Pittsburgh as a free agent, and he was on that Super Bowl 45 team that played in Dallas, and they asked him about playing in his hometown and how great it was, and he said, "Look, it's a Super Bowl. It could be in Siberia. It's still the Super Bowl. I'm excited about playing." So I guess I don't feel that sorry about for these guys, but still, I can't wait to get back for things to get back to normal as far as things like Super Bowl hype go, because the hype for this game has been kind of tempered a bit, so I can't wait until we get back to normal when it comes to that. So I'm looking forward to this Sunday's game. I hope you are too, and I hope you'll be watching it somewhere safe and fun. So on that note, I just have one more thing I want to talk about, and if I didn't talk about it, I would be doing the show's title of this service, and that's my favorite Super Bowl memories, not involving the Steelers. I know it's not a very popular thing, but I love football. I love the NFL. I love the Super Bowl, and I have so many of those NFL films highlight of Super Bowls taped on VHS tapes sitting on my shelf that I'll probably never watch again because I don't have a VCR anymore. But the point is, sorry, I'm distracted by another super chat by Just Me. I have to get to this before I miss it. But Just Me is being very generous tonight. Another $5. Thank you very much. And she says, "Here's a chat to change the chat name to Last Call." I guess is that my show? I'm not sure. What about Evans versus Hill? As far as receivers, well, I think they're both special. I think Tyreek Hill is maybe the hardest receiver to defend in the NFL right now. He's just so fast, and I think he's going to be a handful. The Buccaneers have a great defense, but I think they're going to have their hands full with him, just like the 49ers did last year. So I look for Tyreek Hill to quote unquote win that matchup as much as you can when you're playing the same position on opposite teams. But thank you again for the suggestion and the $5 donation. But anyway, just to talk a little bit about my favorite Super Bowl memories before I get into some questions. I have a couple that are I'm kind of cheating on, and the first one is the Ice Bowl, which first of all I wasn't even alive for back in 1967, and second of all, it wasn't a Super Bowl. It was the NFL championship game, and it involved the Packers and Cowboys at Lambeau Field. But I'm bringing that up because of all the non-Steelers games throughout history, that is my favorite game. I love that game. I love watching I've watched every special I can find on that game. I've read every article there is about that game. I love that game. I love all the circumstances involved. I mean, you have the Packers of the 60s who were the original NFL dynasty. They were Football Central back then. They were the Mecca. Lambeau Field was the Mecca of the NFL. Lombardi, Bart Starr, you name it. They were all celebrities. And they were basically on their last leg, that 67 team. And I think they knew it as players. Lombardi obviously knew it because he stepped down as head coach after that season. They knew they were on their last leg. But they still had that extra something to make it to that game. And as far as the Cowboys, they were an expansion team. They came into the league in 1960, and they the year before they had just made the playoffs for the first time, and they lost to the Packers in the NFL championship game at the Cotton Bowl in Dallas or Texas, wherever the Cotton Bowl is. I think it's in Dallas. This was their second trip, and they were a young and up and coming team, and they were trying to knock off this dynasty. So it was a great matchup, and obviously the weather was the major story of this game. That's why it's called the Ice Bowl. It was 13 degrees below zero at kickoff, and the Packers jumped out to a 14-0 lead, but the Cowboys came back and actually took the lead in the fourth quarter on a running back option pass from Dan Reeves. Remember him, head coach of the Broncos and Giants and Falcons. From Dan Reeves to Lance Rensel, the Cowboys receiver, and they had a 17-14 lead. It looked like they were finally going to get over the hump as a young organization, but the Packers came back and won the game with 13 seconds left on Bart Starr's quarterback sneak, and of course 2 weeks later they won their second Super Bowl, and it was their fifth title of the decade, I believe. So. But the reason why I think I'm really fascinated by this game is because, again, like I said, the Packers were essentially on their last leg, and they probably weren't as talented as the Cowboys were at this point. And, if you know anything about NFL history, the Packers kind of fell off a cliff after this. They were basically a non-entity all throughout the 70s, even the 80s. They really didn't become anything again until Brett Favre came on the scene in the 90s. So this was it for them. But they still had that. Again, they had that something extra, that championship heart and spirit to muster up enough to win this game. They had enough moxie, enough willpower to win this game. As far as the Cowboys were concerned, after this game, they lost a couple. They lost in the playoffs the next 2 years. Don Meredith, who was their franchise quarterback, he retired at 31. He was so despondent over failing and underachieving year after year. They made it to Super Bowl V against the Colts, and they were clearly the better and more talented team. But they lost on the last second field goal. And there's that famous scene at the end of that game where Bob Lilly, their legendary defensive tackle, throwing his helmet like 30 yards in the air. I'm not sure if it ever even came down. So NFL history is littered with teams like those Cowboys teams, those teams that window's only open for so long. If you look at those Bills teams of the 90s that lost 4 Super Bowls in a row, the Vikings of the 60s and 70s that lost 4 Super Bowls, the Oilers of the late 80s and the early 90s, they were Jerry Glanville's Oilers. That Jack Pardee was a coach at one point, and they missed their window. That's why there's shows called America's Game Missing Rings. I don't know if you ever watched any of those episodes, but they're pretty interesting. So there's a lot of teams throughout history that missed their window, and the Cowboys could have very easily been one of those teams. Yet they kept building their organization. They kept adding talent. They refused to quit, and they got over the hump, and they won Super Bowl VI. They made it to a few more that decade, and they won Super Bowl XII. Obviously, they had their epic matchups with the Steelers in those Super Bowls of 10 and 13. It seemed like they were always in the NFC title game, and they became America's team. They went from a team that could have very easily fallen off after so many close calls in the playoffs, so many near misses, I should say. They went from that to a dynasty. So that's why I find that game so fascinating. And another Super Bowl memory that I have, it's not a memory, is Super Bowl 12 with the Broncos and the Cowboys. I love the story of the 77 Broncos. I mean, if you're a fan of the Steelers, you might be able to relate to a long-time fan, I should say, like an old-time fan of the team that remembers how bad they were in the 60s and 50s. But the Broncos, when they came into being in the early 60s through 77, they really hadn't done anything. I don't think they ever even made the playoffs until 77. but they certainly had a lot of losing seasons. And Denver as a city was thought of as like as flyover country. Nobody. It was just an ordinary outpost out west that nobody cared about. But when the Broncos exploded on the scene in '77, I mean, the whole city just fell in love with them. And it kind of reminds me of that '72 Steelers team, the Immaculate Reception year, where they hadn't made the playoffs basically for 40 years. And '72 comes along, and there's Franco's Italian Army. The city was just this, like Franco Harris said, it was like the city had been waiting forever for that year to come along. And that's kind of how it was for the Broncos in '77. And if you read a lot of stories about that team, and you read some quotes from fans who were around back then, their attitude is, look, that the Super Bowls they won in the late '90s with Elway, that one they won with Manning a few years ago, those are great. But that '77 team, even though they didn't win, they lost. They lost actually pretty badly to the Cowboys. That team, well, there was nothing. I've never felt that way about these guys since then. That was, you can't replace that feeling. And I think that's a very relatable thing, because I think there's nothing like that first time. When a team wins for the first time, I think it's a very special feeling. And I kind of experienced that a few years ago with the Pirates in 2013, when they finally got over the hump and made the playoffs for the first time in 21 years, and they went on a fairly decent run in the playoffs, and it was a really magical time. And and they made the playoffs 2 years after that, but it just didn't feel quite as magical. The Steelers, that Super Bowl 40 team, will always be the most special one to me, because it was, in many ways, it was my first one. The one a few years later against the Cardinals, that was great. In many ways, it was superior as far as the game was concerned, but it was, don't get me wrong, I loved it, but there was nothing like that first one, Super Bowl 40. So I can kind of relate to what these Broncos fans are talking about when I talk about that '77 team. And then there's some other great memories I have. Riggins in Super Bowl, was it 17? Washington against Miami, that 40-yard run on a fourth down. That was a great one for me. I love that '84 season with the 49ers and the Dolphins, and how Joe Montana, everybody was expecting Dan Marino to be the star of that game, and Joe Montana just dominated. Fast forward a few years, that Super Bowl, I think it was 23. The 49ers and the Bengals, and Montana took them on that drive in the last second, hit John Taylor in the last 30 seconds of the game to win it. You fast forward through the 90s with the Broncos finally snapping the NFC's run of dominance in the Super Bowl when they beat the Packers in '97, following the '97 season. I was so happy after that. It felt like the Steelers won, even though the Broncos beat the Steelers 2 weeks earlier in the AFC Championship game. I was just so happy to finally see the AFC prevail in the Super Bowl. And if you look at that, the really interesting part of the NFC's 13-year run is, if you take away Joe Montana and Troy Aikman, obviously they're two all-time great quarterbacks. A lot of these teams, like the Giants and the Bears and Washington, I mean, they won with defense and running the football. They just kind of imposed their will on these teams. Like, they beat up on teams like the Bills with Jim Kelly, and the Broncos with John Elway. But I mean, it was quarterbacks like Jim McMahon, Doug Williams, Mark Rippon, Phil Simms, Jeff Hostetler, I'm sorry. So, I mean, it was really an interesting little run that they had in how, you think of the franchise quarterback being the main reason why you win the Super Bowl. And for the vast majority of the history of the event, that's true. But during the NFC's run of dominance, you know, with a lot of these teams, it was about, you know, again, about physicality and just imposing your will on the other team, and that's how they went. So it was a pretty interesting time. But that's pretty much all I have for tonight. I'm going to take some questions now and some comments to see what we have here. Here's one from Javier Mori. He's obviously a longtime fan. He says, I watched Steelers versus Vikings Super Bowl the other day. Oh, I see. You watched it on YouTube. Okay, that makes more sense. My bad. I didn't mean to insinuate that you were really old. Not that you're really old if you're 70, because my mom's 70 now, and I hate to think that's old. Here's one from Yule Skinner. We haven't seen Yule in a long time. And he says, Chuck Howley, an underrated great one at linebacker. And he was, what's the... a great trivia question involving him. He was an MVP of a losing team. I think he was the only one who ever won the MVP from the losing team in the Super Bowl. That Super Bowl V game between the Cowboys and the Colts. Chuck Howley was named MVP. I don't think you'll ever see that again because I think it's almost predetermined that they're going to give the MVP to a player on the winning team. I don't think you'll ever see a time when the MVP comes from the losing side. It would have to be an almost unreal performance, like, you know, 6 touchdowns in a game or something, or 200 rushing yards, something like that, something crazy. Here's one from Super Chick 46. Tony, you missed Dave's super chat. I'm sorry. Let me go back and try to find that. I apologize, Dave. Let's see if I can find. Here we are. Here we are. I'm sorry. Let me see if I can highlight that here. Hey, T, miss you on Saturdays. Thought I could catch you tonight. Well, thank you. Thank you, Dave. I appreciate that. I appreciate you checking me out. I appreciate the $5. Yeah, I moved to Saturdays about a month or so ago because I have a job now that takes me away on Saturday afternoon. So we had to change things around. But I think it's a fun show. Doing it Friday nights now. It's fun being with you guys on Fridays. I've gotten used to it. I'm not as sleepy now as I used to be. So let's see if we can answer some more questions. Again, thank you, Dave, for that generous donation. Let's see what else we have here. Here's one from Cecil Music. Steelers of the 70s may be the best ever because they had to beat great teams every year, including a great Cowboys team twice in Super Bowls. Yeah, and they had the Cowboys. Obviously, the Cowboys were essentially a few plays away over the course of about 15 years. If you go back to those Packers games of the 60s through Super Bowl V, those games against the Steelers, the Super Bowls, and then of course all the NFC title games that they were in the early 80s. They were basically a few plays away from possibly being the greatest dynasty ever. And that's why, you know, what the Steelers did by beating them and the Raiders, they beat the Raiders. They you know, there were a lot of great teams back then, a lot of great, you know, as I've said to Brian many times, I kind of wish I was 10, 12 years older just so I can remember those 70s teams and that 70s era of football. It was really a special time. In many ways, probably the golden era of the NFL. I'd say the late 70s, the late 60s through the early to mid 80s. I think that was really a special time for the league. And obviously it's still great now, but I think there was so many great teams and so many teams that could have emerged as dynasties in their own right, if not for other dynasties knocking them off. You know, you had the Oilers, you had the Bills of the early 90s, the Broncos with Elway, the early years, the Browns of the 80s, of course the Raiders, you know, those Denver teams that I mentioned from the late 70s. So it was a very special time. The NFC, the Rams, I mean, they were in it year after year after year, and they never got over the hump until 79 when it looked like they had no chance of even making the playoffs. But they made the playoffs, and they made it to the Super Bowl. the Vikings. Of course, I mentioned the Cowboys. The list, Washington. Just a lot of great teams back then, and I love going back and watching those old NFL films, shows about that era. Here's one from Dave Shipley. Jack Ham's pick with a Franco 20-something yard run was a flip of losing. I think, is that what you mean, the AFC title game against the Raiders? I mean, a lot of people say that was the most important win in team history when they beat the Raiders in '74 to go to their first Super Bowl. That was a few days after Chuck Noll made his "the best damn team is in this room" speech, when a lot of people were calling the Raiders Dolphins divisional matchup Super Bowl 8.5. They kind of left Pittsburgh out of the equation, and Pittsburgh, they had no idea that Pittsburgh was about to become the greatest dynasty ever. So I think it was a pretty neat turn of events. Yeah, a lot of people. Here's another one from Cecil. Lambert said 76 was their best. So yeah, a lot of people say that. And, I think that's another example of talking in absolutes, because it's easy to say they would have won if Franco and Rocky wouldn't have gotten hurt for the playoffs. But we'll never know for sure. I mean, the defense kind of struggled in that game against the Raiders. Obviously, the offense did too. So it's hard to say, but they won 4 of them. I think that's nothing to sneeze at, obviously. Mike, here's another one from Cecil's really active tonight. Mike Wagner said he felt bad for the Oilers and Bengals because they had some good teams. Wagner said we were in their way. Yeah, that's what's so special about that. And if you look at the 2000s with the Patriots and the Steelers and the Colts, and if it wasn't for the Steelers and the Patriots, maybe the Colts win more. If it wasn't for the Patriots, maybe the Steelers win more. It's always fun when you got a concentration of talent in one conference or one division. It just makes it more interesting. Here's one from Javier More. John Elway is my favorite non-Steelers quarterback. You have some company there, my friend, because I was a big Elway fan growing up. I still am. I enjoy watching him play. I love watching quarterbacks in general because I think obviously they mean so much to the league and their teams, and when you stumble upon a really great one, it makes so much of a difference. So, but yeah, Elway was just such a special talent, and it's interesting how his career went, because in those 80s teams that he played on when he was probably in his prime, I mean, they were some good teams, but he carried them to 3 Super Bowls, But by the time he got old, the team around him was so good that they kind of carried. I mean, he was obviously he contributed greatly. He was the MVP of the last Super Bowl he was in, but they kind of carried him to a Super Bowl, two in a row to close out his career. So, excuse me. Here's one from Chad Landsman. They lost Terry and Mike Tomczak, quarterback, and team pitched several shutouts, and I think they won 6 straight. Yeah, they only, you're talking about the 76 team. I think you meant Cruz. I guess that's where I was confused there. Yeah, they lost Terry Bradshaw. He was slammed on his head by Turkey Jones of the Browns during Pittsburgh's 1-4 start, and Mike Kruzak came in, didn't throw a touchdown pass, but they won what? He said 9 straight, and they only gave up 28 points. I mean, that was just an incredible run of defense, and they kind of changed the rules after that year. That's how dominant Pittsburgh was on defense. So, what else we have here? Here's one from Tom Vallejo. I like Joe Montana. Joe Cool. Yeah, I love watching Montana too. There were a lot of great quarterbacks of the 80s and of course 90s, 70s. I mean, here's one from Yul Skinner regarding Dan Marino, who unfortunately for him, only made it to 1 Super Bowl and lost his second year. maybe the greatest year any quarterback's ever had when he threw 48 touchdowns for the Dolphins. And Mike Mule says, Shola can never build a defense to help Marino. That's true. And they never quite – they had a lot of good teams with him, but they could never quite build a complete football team for him. And maybe, a lot of it had to do with the fact that they were paying Marino a lot of money, and they couldn't really afford anybody else. And, of course, during the bulk of his career, free agency didn't exist, salary cap didn't exist, so it was harder maybe to go out and build a team unless you hit on the draft. And with a guy like Marino, you're always drafting in the 20s. I think we've seen that a lot with Ben. It's hard to find those special defenders when you're always drafting in the 20s. T.J. Watt and Cam Hayward being the exceptions, of course. Here's one from Chad Landsman. In your opinion, in which era had the weaker head coach? When you say weaker head coach, are you talking about between the three of them? I mean, I don't know. I think Noel obviously had the greatest run of between Noel, Cowher, and Tomlin. Between Cowher and Tomlin, I've said it many times, their careers are almost eerily similar. They both won one, they both been to one, and they both had to turn over their rosters several times and rebuild their team on the fly. Tomlin's never had a losing season, whereas Cowher had a few. But then again, Cowher didn't have Cowher didn't have Ben Roethlisberger the whole time. So, you could say, I'd say they're about even. I would say Noel's number one, and Cowher and Tomlin are you could say they're tied for 1B, if that's what you meant by that. I'm not sure. So, on that note, I think I've rambled on for 52 minutes. It's almost 10 o'clock. I have to be at work in like 7 minutes. Not really, but it kind of feels that way. I have to be at work by 7 tomorrow. So I want to get some shut-eye before I begin my new work week, which Saturdays are now my Mondays. So it was fun talking to you. And I'll leave you with Mark Davidson's chat. All the Super Bowl talk, I'm going to go watch one. I think that's what that's how I'm going to end my night, by watching some old Super Bowls on YouTube. So thank you all for joining me, and I hope you can enjoy the Super Bowl, and I hope you have a great weekend. And as always, go Steelers.